before we start, one of the important factors I'm going to talk to you about is sitting. And we've done a lot of that today, and it's actually really unhealthy. So could you just stand up and turn around a couple of times and sit down again? Excellent. In the UK recently, you can sit down again, it's okay. Right there. I'll just shout. Thank you very much. In the UK recently, sitting was called the new smoking because it has potentially as big an effect on your longevity as smoking has. And we heard earlier that weight gain obviously has a similar effect. So we're looking at a lot of different added factors in our lives that could subtract or indeed add to our longevity. And that's the basis for what I'm going to talk about. I'm a chiropractor. I've been a chiropractor for 34 years. And I got pretty good at getting people out of pain. But what became ever more inspiring is to do what do you do with people once they're out of pain? How do we actually make them overall healthier and have a better well-being? So we wanted to try and develop a program that allowed us to do that. But how do we assess it? So what we wanted to do is to try and quantify a score, generate a score that tells us how well is people actually doing. What is their overall health and well-being at the current time, and how can we measure that it improves? So we came up with the concept of the well-being age, and it's affectionately known as the 10S, because the 10S is representative of the 10 factors that make up your well-being age. So we wanted to try and make a tool that inspired not just the participants, but also the people who were actually overseeing the interventions to take a more of an active interest in what is the individual factors for this person and how can we improve them, how do we go about that, but also more importantly to then come back and remeasure and say, have we made a difference to these people? Now I will probably have the same problems that everybody else will have, but oh, someone's doing it for me. So what we've come up with is a tool that can be performed in about 20 minutes and it includes these different factors that we're going to cover a little bit more in detail in a minute. And we wanted to try and combine both risk and benefits of some structural factors such as how strong are you, how much can you balance on one foot, for instance, and those type of factors, but also what's your current life looking like, what is your social life looking like, what's your stress situation like, and so forth. And you can see where we're going with strength. Balance doesn't start with S, so we called it Spark, because Spark is coordination and things like that, but we'll come back to that in a minute. But all of the factors start with an S. So where are you, and where would you like to be? And how do we then get you there? Oh, look at that. So these are the 10S factors, and we're trying to use factors that have very good evidence base. So this is backed up in research in various studies, it's backed up in the use of questionnaires and physical assessment tools already in existence, but what we wanted to try and do is to have something that was short and sweet and made sense to both the people who do the interventions as well as the people who take part. So we call them STREAM because blood pressure doesn't start with an S. And then we went from there, trying to see if we can find the factors that were relevant to what we're trying to look at, all starting with an S. And you'll see there that weight doesn't come into it. Weight doesn't start with an S, but weight is also a very difficult one to use for progress, because we all know that weight very poorly reflects people's well-being. It very poorly reflects a lot of other aspects of their health. So we wanted to try and get away from that. But we have got structure in there, because what is relevant is not where and how much you weigh, but where is the fat deposited. So something like structure, where we measure around your midriff and around your Adam's apple, will tell us your chance of... Sorry? Oh, sorry. How your fat distribution could potentially influence your health and well-being. We have strength, which is a hugely researched factor in health and well-being, and a predictor of both longevity and morbidity. And then we have SPARK, which is a coordination type of test. We have 2 of those. Either you can balance on 1 foot, or how long does it take you to stand up from a seat, walk 3 meters away, turn around, come back, sit back down again. Those type of measures are the physical assessments. And then we look at lifestyle measures, all beginning with an S, all 6 of them. Okay? Together, I still can work this out. There we go, we're going back now. There we go. Is that forward or back? Can we, yeah. Is someone else doing this for me? I'll put this away then. Can I have the next slide? So what we do is we put all those factors together, and then we want some factors that can inspire, again, participants as well as people causing the interventions of how much, where are we currently, what do we need to improve on, and how do we progress. And we came up with 3 measures. We've got the well-being age, and we've got the wonky wheel, and then we have the lifespan versus health span discussion, which I believe Sophia mentioned in a different version that had an ED, EQ, something 5, and I've never heard of it before, but I'd like to have a reference for that, because it's that type of measure that we're looking at. So, the wellbeing age, thank you, is based on mostly the longevity studies that are the basis for this type of tool. So with longevity studies, with a lot of studies, there is an age norm. So for instance, how strong are you if I'm either asking you to squeeze with your grip strength, or if I ask you to, on one leg, try and lift yourself up on your tiptoes, how many can you do of those? There's a normal range for your age for that. So we can pretty much use that as a conversion for, are you younger than your age or are you older than your age? Okay? And those type of factors are plenty, but there are also some that have a mortality risk. So smoking, for instance, has a very easy way of converting smoking into an increased mortality risk. So we've used those different factors to create what's known as the well-being age. And this person is slightly older than their current age, so they're actually doing pretty good. But it can happen because some of these, if you, for instance, your grip strength is better than your age, then you can actually have a well-being age that's younger than when you are currently. And that's what we also aspire to, if you like. Then the next slide is the wonky wheel. And the wonky wheel is something that we've all tried, either in the supermarket with a wonky wheel on the shopping cart, or something similar on the bike. We want to have a smoother ride through life. Okay? And if we, rather than try and say, well, we have to optimize all factors, if we said to this person, for instance, we really need to reduce the significance of your stress and the way that the stress influences your well-being, then you will have a much smoother ride through life. We can then address the others if they are still significant for you, but at the moment, let's concentrate on that. We could also tell them, you shouldn't come to a conference and sit for hours, because sitting is obviously another factor that could be relevant for this person. Okay? Then we come to the next factor, which is this health span idea. Now, health span is the idea, and the next slide will show that in a lot better detail, but health span is the quality of your years, not necessarily the quantity of your years. When just being able to live to 90 is not a quality in itself if you have to spend the last 20 years in a sick bed. So we want to try and make the quality of those years as good as at all possible. And if we look at the next slide, that's the difference between lifespan and health span. So what we're all aspiring to is to have the health span here of around 90 years, or lifespan of around the 90 years, but we want to have the blue curve so that we spend right up until certainly about 80 in the range that we've allowed ourselves to call fit, before we then become functional or dysfunctional or indeed frail. Because that's a better quality of life. And that's something that everybody can relate to, especially when you're past 50. And I am. So what we then do on this basis is that we produce these reports that on purpose is trying to use those illustrations. So we spend a lot of time on the wonky wheel. We spend a lot of time on talking about the difference between their lifespan and their health span. And we obviously then start looking at the details of where does your current well-being age come from, and how can we improve it when we remeasure it in later times. We try and make it as colourful as at all possible, and make something, a document that they want to take away and show people. We found that this type of tool works really well with other well-being and health initiatives. And we work quite closely with the well-being people and their Recalibrate well-being program. Because it addresses all of those factors that we've discussed and we use for the basis for this tool. So the Recalibrate Wellbeing Program is a 12-week program where part of it is tutored and that's not the word I'm looking for, but supported by a wellbeing coach. And then you go away with a typical intervention action that you've chosen yourself to work with for the following week. And then you come back, you reevaluate the success of that experiment, and then you go on to the next theme and choose your intervention and experiment on that basis. Now, if the next slide, then I've chosen some, try and show some successes on the basis of this tool, based on 3 different groups that went through the Recalibrate Wellbeing. It was a program that was run by our local football club, aimed at lower socioeconomic population, and they ran through the program. Now, there was a fairly high completion rate, which is in itself a sign of success. It's often difficult to get people to turn up for 12 successive weeks, but we had a significant number of people who did that. In fact, the numbers here are based on the 25 participants. What we've very easily found, though, and on this particular occasion, we did look at weight, we did look at fat percentage, we did look at BMI, which are the traditional measures of success in these type of intervention programs. But as you can see, they're very poor indicators of success of these type of intervention programs. People in this program, there were 25, so some lost weight, some didn't, some gained weight during that 12-week program, but on average, the group as a whole put on 1.6 kilograms. You can't put that down as success. Body fat, round about 1.6% increase. So pretty much matching, interestingly enough, on the figures there. The BMI went down by half a point. Again, very difficult to say a success. I've had difference. The next slide is on the effect on blood pressure, which is a interesting measure if you're looking at the medical definition of health and well-being. But the last bit of the last slide showed that the well-being age actually was a significant improvement. Now, if we go back one slide. Thank you. So this looks at the blood pressure. And the reason I've called this slide, what does this mean, is the blood pressure is actually becomes very easy for the rest of us to use as a measure and a terminology of success or otherwise. But you will find that a very small part of the population really understands blood pressure. And what does it actually mean when I'm told that I'm stage 1 hypertensive? And how is that much better than stage 2, or is it much better? So, although we can see that there were 6 people who managed to normalize their blood pressure during the 12 weeks, which is a huge thing for the local GP. The GP will sit up and take notice. The GP wants to participate in these type of programs. If for nothing else, then we can record the blood pressure report for them. Because blood pressure is one of those factors that GPs, certainly in the UK, are obliged to keep track of in all their patient groups. But they don't see their patients anymore, so they can't keep track of it. So if other people are willing to take their blood pressure and submit it to the GP will be very interested, especially if we found a way of actually reducing it without them getting back on the scene. But blood pressure is not a good measure. Weight is even less of a good measure, but blood pressure is not that good. If we look at the next slide, then we start looking at the well-being age. And the well-being age, here it comes. Next, there we go. Well-being age is uniformly improving on all participants. Now, I know there are 3 people on there that didn't improve, but if you look at the difference between what it did to their fat measurements, BMI, weight, and so forth, and the relatively low success rate with blood pressure, the success here with well-being age is pretty significant. And what we found in all the groups that we run is that this becomes a tool that people understand. I'm now younger than I used to be. It's a very powerful message. And it's something that they can celebrate not only for themselves, but they are confident in celebrating for the other participants. And that becomes a social tool that means that the same group wants to come back and do it again. And they often want to come back and do it again with the same people, because those are the people they share the journey with. So I think we've managed, we're still in early stages, we're still reworking certain factors within the tool, but we've managed to create a tool that generates a common language and a common experience and actually shows success in terms that people can understand, rather than reverting back to what has been a very medical terminology, and a terminology that I've certainly seen referred to today, of, for instance, when it centers around weight, as being less successful than we'd hoped for. And we're not quite sure how it translates, was what I heard from Bournemouth University. I'm sure that they will see, when they go into the further detail and the further analysis of the data, that it translates on the back of all the other success criteria to being part of why this works. But if we can have something that will make people feel the success immediately, I think we're getting somewhere. Okay? I don't think there are any more slides. Thank you very much.